Welcome to the Twin Sentinels, a supernatural pack saga, where fate is messy, the sparks are wild, and the full moon brings more than fur and fangs. There's snark, steam, and a mate bond neither of them ask for, but can't escape. Buckle up, pack. From haunted hearts to ancient curses, you'll find stories here that pull you in and don't let go. If you're into tales that twist the real and the unreal, you're in the right place. TM Nyxen, Audiobooks. Hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. The snow fell with the deliberate cruelty of a winter god, that night thick, silent, and utterly merciless. Each flake was a tiny shroud, blanketing the world in white and stifling the screams that clawed their way out from beneath its deceptive beauty. The forest, usually a symphony of nocturnal sounds, was muted, choked by the relentless descent. Christian had followed the scent of blood for over an hour. It was iron-rich, sharp, and chillingly fresh, a crimson thread woven through the icy tapestry of the night. It carved through the winter air like a shard of glass through flesh, a violation of the pristine stillness. Moonlight, fractured by the dense canopy, barely touched the forest floor, casting long skeletal shadows that danced with the falling snow. But he didn't need it. He was Christian, alpha of Moonhill Pack. His senses were honed by generations of wolves, sharper than human sight, and what they told him now chilled him more profoundly than the frigid air ever could. A primal dread, cold and heavy, settled in his gut. The clearing was not merely a massacre, it was a desecration. Bodies lay strewn across the frostbitten ground in grotesque poses, caught mid-shift. Limbs were warped and twisted at unnatural angles, jaws frozen in silent, agonized snarls. Fur, once proud and gleaming, was slick with blood, matted and dark against the pristine white. A rogue attack, without question. But this was not the frenzied, uncontrolled violence of wild animals. This was cold, calculated butchery, a message carved in bone and silence, whispered on the wind, a challenge thrown down with brutal force. The meticulousness of the carnage suggested a deliberate intent, a calculated cruelty that went beyond mere territorial dispute. These wolves hadn't just been killed, they had been eradicated. Christian's pulse quickened not from fear, though a sliver of icy apprehension traced his spine. This was something far beyond a typical border skirmish. No, his accelerated heartbeat stemmed from instinct, a deep-seated, primal response to the violation of pack law. Alpha deep, the protective fire surged, mixing with a burning rage. He scanned the scene, his eyes sharp, cataloging the details, seeking any clue, any signature that might identify the perpetrators of this horrific act. The air crackled with unspoken threat. Then, a sound pierced the oppressive silence. A whimper, small and fragile, so faint it nearly vanished into the hush of falling snow. It was the sound of raw, unadulterated terror, a tiny spark of life struggling against the encroaching darkness. He turned, his movement fluid and silent, toward the shattered tree line where the forest edge dissolved into a tangle of broken branches and snow-laden pines. His eyes, now adjusted to the scant light, caught a flicker of movement in the shadows. Two boys, no older than 8 or 9, crouched behind the exposed, gnarled roots of an overturned pine, its roots reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. One sat upright, arms locked protectively around the other like a desperate barricade. The smaller one pale as death, shaking uncontrollably, wild-eyed with shock-head blood smeared across his face and matted in his hair. Not his own. Christian smelled it, the coppery tang of his pack. The older held him like a shield, his stare hollow, burning with a fierce, defiant light that belied his tender years. "Get back," the older boy rasped, his voice raw and trembling, but laced with a desperate courage. "We bite." The words were more a pathetic warning than a genuine threat. Christian crouched low, making himself appear less imposing, his hands open and empty in a gesture of peace. His voice was calm, a soothing balm against the chaos. "I don't doubt it." The boy didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. He watched Christian like prey, watching a predator, gauging its intentions, calculating whether he might still stand a chance, however slim, against overwhelming power. He was a tiny, wounded wolf, cornered and ready to fight to the death. "What's your name, son?" Christian asked, his voice gentle. No answer. The boy remained stubbornly silent, his jaw clenched tight. "His name is Leo," the smaller one whispered, his teeth chattering so violently that the words were almost unintelligible. "I'm London." Christian nodded slowly, deliberately. "Leo. London. You protected your brother, Leo. That's brave. That's strong." He let the words hang in the air, hoping to pierce the wall of fear and trauma that surrounded them. "They killed our pack," London said, his voice flat, toneless, devoid of emotion. A child was already walking through the ashes of his life. "Our mother, our father, everyone." The words fell like stones in the silent clearing. "I know," Christian said, his voice heavy with empathy. He could feel the weight of their loss, the unimaginable horror they had witnessed. London's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering in their depths. "Are you here to finish it?" Christian shook his head slowly, deliberately. "No, pup. I'm here to offer you something else." London didn't move, didn't breathe. He was frozen, suspended between hope and despair. "Like what?" "A home," Christian said, his voice firm and unwavering. "A pack. A place where no one gets to hurt you again. Where you become the ones who protect." He watched their faces, searching for any sign of understanding, any glimmer of hope. He saw the flicker hope and fear, tangled and tense, warring within London's eyes. Leo clutched London tighter, burying his face in his brother's side. London didn't speak, didn't offer any outward sign of acceptance, but something profound within him shifted. Not trust, not yet, but a decision, settled in silence, a fragile seed planted in the frozen ground of their despair. Christian rose slowly, deliberately, maintaining eye contact with London, and held out his hand, palm open, a gesture of invitation, of trust. And slowly wary, his eyes wide with apprehension but unflinching in their gaze, London reached out and took it. His small hand, cold and trembling, disappeared within Christian's larger, calloused one. The alpha of Moonhill turned, two broken orphaned wolves clinging to his shadow, and led them through the snow, away from the carnage, toward an uncertain future. The wind howled a mournful dirge, carrying away the scent of blood and death, leaving only the faintest whisper of hope in its wake. They never looked back at the massacre, but the memory of that night, the faces of their lost family, the cold, brutal truth of their world, would forever be etched into their hearts, shaping the men they would become and the choices they would make. The snow continued to fall, burying the past, but beneath the surface, the seeds of vengeance had been sown. The mountains were quiet tonight. Not the comfortable hush of slumber, but a strange, heavy silence that pressed down like a physical weight. It was a kind of stillness that only descended when the wind, a restless spirit in these peaks, respected the ground it crossed, holding its breath in anticipation. Even the stars seemed to dim, as if veiled by a premonition. Christian stood at the edge of the cliff near the Moonhill Lodge, a weathered sentinel against the indigo sky. His arms were folded across his broad chest, the muscles beneath his thick coat corded and strong despite the years etched onto his face. Below, the forest stretched in every direction, ancient, watchful, a sea of pines and firs swallowing the valleys whole. He'd hunted these woods his entire life, knew every hidden game trail, every treacherous ravine, bled for them, killed for them, protecting his pack from dangers both seen and unseen. The scent of pine and snow was woven into the very fabric of his being, a primal language he understood better than any human tongue. Now, his sons did the same. He could almost feel their presence rippling through the woods, the subtle shift in the forest mood that marked their passage. "They're late," he muttered, the words carried away by the non-existent wind. A flicker of unease stirred within him. Punctuality was a virtue in their world, where a moment's hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. Behind him, boots crunched on the fresh layer of snow. The sound was a welcome intrusion, easing the knot in his stomach. "We had to stop for food," London said casually, his voice a smooth counterpoint to the rough silence of the mountains. Leo thought with his stomach. Again, Leo grunted, the sound reverberating slightly in the still air. You say that like you didn't eat twice as much, Twig. Christian didn't turn around, but a smile, a rare and precious thing, tugged at the edge of his mouth, crinkling the corners of his eyes. You boys always bicker this loud or only when I'm trying to enjoy the view? The playful tone belied the undercurrent of pride he felt. They were alive, they were together, and their banter, however irritating at times, was a testament to their bond. They flanked him without a word, moving with the practiced ease of wolves circling their alpha, one on each side. Twins. Not by looks, Leo was broader, heavier in the shoulders, a bear of a man with dark, brooding eyes that held a smoldering, storm behind the eyes kind of stillness. He radiated a quiet strength, a sense of unwavering resolve. London was leaner, almost wiry, sharper in every movement, coiled like a drawn bow, ready to unleash his energy with explosive force. His eyes were quick and intelligent, constantly scanning their surroundings. But there was something else, something deeper in how they stood, how they breathed in sync, a silent communication that transcended words. Sentinels, born in blood, raised in bond, chosen not just for their strength or skill, but for an innate connection that amplified their abilities when they fought as one. You asked to see us? Leo asked, his voice serious as ever. The playful mood banished instantly. He understood the weight of responsibility that rested on their shoulders. Christian didn't answer right away. He savored the moment, the quiet camaraderie, knowing that it might be fleeting. The moon, a silver disk in the inky sky, broke free of the clouds overhead, silvering the snow-covered landscape and casting long, dancing shadows behind it. The light illuminated the worry lines etched into Christian's face, the weariness that he usually kept hidden from his sons. Do you remember, he said finally, his voice low and gravelly, what you looked like when I found you? Neither twin answered, but the air itself seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken memories. A pause that stretched, reverent and heavy with the weight of the past. The question was not merely about recalling a memory, but about acknowledging the transformation they had undergone, the debt they owed him. I do, Christian said, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. I remember two feral things hiding behind a tree, eyes too old for your faces. You were both skin and bone, haunted by a past no child should ever know. Scared, wild, ready to rip out my throat if I came too close. He remembered the animalistic snarls, the desperate hunger in their eyes, the raw, untamed power that even then he had recognized. London's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, filled with a gratitude that ran deeper than words. You still offered us your hand. Christian looked down at it now, scarred, calloused, worn from decades of war and winter, a testament to a life lived on the edge. I didn't know what you'd do. I knew the risks, but I knew what I would do. I wasn't going to leave you in the dark to be consumed by the shadows. You didn't, Leo said, his voice firm, unwavering. You never did. They stood like that for a while, bathed in the cold moonlight, three figures silhouetted against the sky. No orders, no tests, just quiet, the unspoken language of family binds them together. When I named you Sentinels, Christian said at last, breaking the silence, I didn't do it to make you feel special, to inflate your egos. I did it because you are the last line between this pack, this family, and what hunts us in the darkness. It's not a title, it's a truth, a burden, and a responsibility that you must carry with every breath you take. We know, London said, his voice edged with steel. I don't think you do, Christian replied, turning to face them at last, his eyes piercing and intense. You're not boys anymore. You're men, forged in the fires of hardship and sacrifice. And I'm not the only one watching. The others, they look to you. They see you as my sons. Yes, but more than that, they see the future in you, the strength and resilience that will carry them through the coming storms. Leo's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek. You expecting to die, father? Trying to lay some heavy guilt trip on us before you kick the bucket? Christian let out a short, humorless laugh. Not today, damn it. I still have a few hunts left in me. But I'm not foolish enough to think I'll lead forever. The mantle will pass. And when it does, You must be ready to bear its weight. Silence again. A heavy silence, pregnant with unspoken fears and anxieties. Then Christian stepped forward and placed a hand on each of their shoulders, his grip firm and reassuring. He could feel the tension radiating from them, the barely suppressed energy that threatened to erupt. "Whatever comes next," he said, voice low, firm, resonant with the authority of an alpha. "You face it together. No one else in this pack can do what you do. Not alone, not without the other. Your bond is your strength. Your unity is our salvation." The twins didn't speak, but Christian saw it. That shared look, that flicker of understanding that passed between them. The unspoken vow between them was born long before they'd ever known his name, forged in shared trauma and nurtured by unwavering loyalty. "I'm proud of you both," Christian said, his voice softening, the stern alpha replaced by a loving father, "not just for what you can do, for your strength or your skill, but for who you've become. For the men you have fought to be, despite everything you've suffered." Leo swallowed hard, his usual stoicism cracking slightly. London's eyes dropped to the snow, unable to meet his father's gaze. "Thank you, Father," London said softly, the words carrying a weight of emotion that belied their simplicity. "Yeah," Leo added, his voice rough around the edges. "Even when you hit us too hard during training." Some of those bruises lasted for weeks. Christian grinned, the expression genuine and warm. "That's love, son. Tough love, maybe, but love nonetheless. Ask any wolf. They'll tell you the same." They laughed, quietly but real, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. The kind of laughter that only comes from people who've survived together, who've faced down the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side. The kind that binds, that heals, that makes them a family. But even in the shared laughter, the undercurrent of unease remained, a silent reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond the edge of the light, waiting for their moment to strike. The Alpha Sons knew their duty. They would be ready. The wind carried a scent that shouldn't have been there, a metallic tang, acrid and unsettling, like old wounds reopened and left to fester. It was a smell that clung to the back of the throat, a phantom reminder of a past they desperately tried to bury. London froze halfway down the ridge, nostrils flaring, every muscle tightening beneath his thick wool coat. His senses, honed by years of living on the edge of the wild, screamed a warning. The playful bite of the winter air was suddenly laced with something sinister. Snow crunched behind him as Leo caught up, his breath misting in the frigid air. "You smell that?" London asked, his voice low and sharp, a predator's growl disguised as a question. The words were clipped, urgency bleeding into the crisp mountain air. Leo sniffed the air, drawing a deep breath. His brow furrowed. "Yeah, blood, but not fresh." He scanned the surrounding pines, his eyes narrowed, focusing on the deeper shadows. "Old, burned in, like the ruins." He was referring to the skeletal remains of their old pack house, a place haunted by memories and the lingering scent of unimaginable violence. London turned his head slightly, listening, his hearing as acute as any wolf's. The forest was quiet, unnervingly so. Even the typically boisterous ravens had gone still, their caws silent as if choked by a sudden fear. It was a silence that echoed in his bones, a chilling premonition that mirrored the night their pack died. The night the world had been painted in blood and fire. "I thought they were gone," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper, laced with disbelief and a flicker of fear. "We hunted the last of those bastards down with father. Years ago, wiped them off the face of the earth." "They're not gone," London muttered, the words like gravel in his throat. He knew it with a certainty that settled like a stone in his gut. "They're back." They tracked the scent to the river bend, the crunch of their boots in the snow, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of the woods. There, nestled amidst the frozen reeds, they found the carcass of a deer. Its throat was torn open with savage brutality, a crimson stain marring the pristine white snow. Its stomach was eviscerated, entrails spilling out onto the frozen ground, and its limbs were snapped backwards like twigs, contorted at unnatural angles. It wasn't a kill for sustenance. It was a desecration, a message, a calling card from a nightmare they thought they'd escaped. Leo stared down at it, his face unreadable, a mask of carefully controlled rage and growing dread. The set of his jaw was the only betrayal, the muscle ticking rhythmically. "Same pattern," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. London's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible above the rustling of the wind. Same scent. It was the scent of malice, of cruelty, of something ancient and malevolent that had no place in this world. They didn't speak for a moment, both of them staring into the gnarled branches of the trees like ghosts might come crawling out of the bark, their eyes glinting with a primal fear and a simmering fury. The forest, once a sanctuary, had become a hunting ground, and they were the prey. When they returned to the lodge, the low, stone building, a beacon of warmth against the encroaching darkness, Christian was waiting on the steps. He stood tall and imposing, arms crossed over his broad chest, the full moon painting his silver-streaked hair with an ethereal light, making him look more wolf than man. His eyes, usually warm and welcoming, were now sharp and guarded. "You found it," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that demanded respect. Not a question, but a statement born of grim understanding. London nodded, the confirmation heavy in the air. "They're back." Christian's jaw worked silently, a barely perceptible tick betraying the turmoil beneath his carefully constructed calm. The news, though expected, was a blow. Generations of peace were threatened, the fragile truce shattered. Then he said, his voice firm, despite the darkness in his eyes, "Get some sleep. I need time to think." "You're not going after them alone," Leo said, stepping forward, his voice challenging, protective. The bond between them was undeniable, forged in blood and lost. "I didn't say I was," Christian deflected, avoiding eye contact. "But you're thinking it," London added, mirroring Leo's protective stance. "We know you, Father. You always carry the burden yourself." Christian didn't respond right away. He looked between them, their height, their strength, the lean muscles honed by years of training and survival, the way they moved together seamlessly like two halves of the same heartbeat. He saw not the boys he had raised, but the powerful wolves they had become. "You're not boys anymore," he said quietly, his voice tinged with a bittersweet pride. "But I'm still your alpha, and you're still our father," London replied, his voice unwavering, filled with a deep respect and an unwavering love. "You taught us better than this. Don't walk into a trap. Not again." Christian gave them a long, searching look, his eyes filled with a mixture of love, concern, and a stubborn resolve. He saw their loyalty, their strength, and the unwavering bond that held them together. He knew they were right. Finally, he nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "I won't." He lied. The sky was heavy with snow, again thick clouds rolling in like bruises across the heavens. The air hung cold and still, pregnant with the promise of a storm that would bury the world in white. It was a sky that mirrored the weight in Christian's heart. Christian moved like a shadow between the trees, silent despite the frost crunching underfoot. Years of hunting had honed his senses and stilled his movements. Even the forest floor seemed to yield to his passing. 3 of his best hunters flanked him: Mara, a woman as fierce as the winter wind; Henry, whose nose could track a whisper on the breeze; and Dune, a mountain of a man who could break bones with his bare handsaw, seasoned, all wary. Their faces were grim, etched with concern. None of them asked why the Alpha had chosen to lead this patrol personally. Duty and unspoken fear kept their questions at bay. They just followed. That's what wolves did. That's what pack meant. He left the twins behind, a deliberate choice, a painful sacrifice. Stay, protect the lodge. That was all he said. His voice had been low, gravelly, laced with a command they wouldn't dare disobey. He needed them to be safe, but he knew they wouldn't stay put for long. The stubborn streak that ran through their veins was a match for his own. They never did, not when their pack was threatened, not when their family was in danger. The scent trail wound low through the underbrush iron and rot and fur, a sickening miasma that clung to the back of the throat. The rogues were marking territory now, not just scavenging for scraps, driven by desperation, claiming and defiling the land that belonged to Moon Hill. It was bold. It was suicidal. A declaration of war scrawled in blood and urine. Or it meant something worse, something he couldn't quite put his finger on, but that prickled the hair on the back of his neck. A plan, a strategy, a calculated risk. "Henry," Christian said without looking back, his voice a low growl barely audible above the sigh of the wind. "You smell that?" The scout shifted beside him, his muscular frame coiling like a spring, lowering his stance as he drew in a deep breath. The subtle twitch of his nostrils betrayed the information he was processing. Yeah, closer, 3, maybe 4 bodies, undernourished, but stronger than they should be, moving with purpose. Deliberate. Christian nodded once, a curt, decisive movement. The pieces were falling into place, painting a grim picture. We push, hard and fast. No prisoners. He couldn't afford to show mercy. Not now. They broke into a sprint, the snow stinging their faces as they tore through the trees. The forest became a blur of gray and white, the only sound the pounding of their boots and the ragged gasps of their breath. It should have worked. It had worked a dozen times before. Moonhill wasn't a soft pack. They were warriors, forged in the crucible of survival. They had faced down starvation, disease, and countless other packs vying for dominance. But something was wrong the second they entered the glade. An unnatural stillness. A sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. The rogues were waiting. A dozen of them, maybe more. Emerging from the shadows like nightmares given form. Not mangy strays, the dregs of society. Not feral loners driven mad by hunger. These were organized, disciplined, their eyes glowing with hunger, yes, but also with a chilling intelligence. Teeth bared, bodies scarred, but steady. They stood their ground, a wall of muscle and malice. Christian didn't hesitate. He knew, in that instant, that diplomacy was dead. Only one language remained. "Moonhill!" he roared, the word ripping from his throat, a primal challenge that echoed through the trees. The shift ripped through him like fire and ice, a searing agony that he welcomed. Bones shattered, fur erupted, and his wolf massive, silver black, scarred and old, as Ware exploded into being. The air crackled with the force of his transformation. His roar was deafening. He charged into the fray, a silver-black blur of fury. The clash was a blur of blood and fangs, a brutal ballet of death. Snarls and growls filled the air, punctuated by the sickening crunch of bone and the wet gurgle of dying breaths. Henry fell first, ambushed by 2 rogues who tore out his throat before he could howl a warning. His body crumpled to the snow, a dark stain spreading quickly. Mara took 2 with her before going down hard, her small form overwhelmed by the sheer number of her attackers. Dune vanished under 3 sets of claws, his roars of defiance quickly silenced. Christian fought like a storm given flesh. He was a whirlwind of teeth and claws, tearing through the rogues with relentless fury. He snapped necks, ripped out throats, and sent bodies flying with the force of his blows. But even storms run out of energy. Even the strongest warrior can be overwhelmed. A rogue with red eyes and a twisted snarl slammed into him from behind, knocking him off balance. Another clamped onto his leg, tearing into his flesh, a tearing in his chest, a searing pain that threatened to drown him in darkness. He threw them off, one by one, tearing and snapping and roaring with everything he had left. But there were too many. They were relentless, their hunger insatiable. And then, a blur. 2 streaks of brown and black, crashing through the undergrowth with the force of a thunderclap. Twin howls split the trees like thunder, a desperate cry that echoed the anguish in Christian's heart. Leo crashed through the tree line first, his wolf form ablaze with rage, fur bristling, eyes burning with a terrifying light. London right behind him, smaller but faster, a whirlwind of claws and teeth, slicing through the enemy like wildfire. They tore into the rogues without mercy, their grief and fury fueling their every strike. One down, then another. The rogues, momentarily stunned by the sudden arrival of reinforcements, began to falter. Christian, half-shifted and staggering, held together only by sheer will, caught Leo's eye across the battlefield. A flicker of relief, of hope, ignited in his chest. He smiled. A weak, bloody grimace, lips cracked and red. "You disobeyed," he rasped, blood bubbling from the corner of his mouth. staining the snow in dark, steaming splatters. Each breath was a ragged, wet struggle, the sound of it sickening. Yeah, London snarled, slamming a rogue into a tree with bone-shattering force. You're welcome. Together, the twins, fueled by adrenaline and grief, forced the rest to scatter. A few rogues, wounded and terrified, limped into the dark, snarling in defeat. The tide had turned, but the victory felt hollow. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged, wet breathing of 3 survivors. Snowflakes drifted lazily, landing on crimson patches in the snow, melting instantly. Leo dropped to human form, hands blood-slicked, face pale with shock. Father Christian was kneeling now, one hand pressed to the gaping wound just beneath his ribs, where a twisted shard of silver had punctured his lung and lodged near his heart. The edges of the wound steamed, flesh refusing to knit, blood seeping slowly but constantly, a dark, steady trickle that no wolf could stop. His breath came in rattling, shallow gasps, each one a saw blade in his chest. I told you not to follow, he said, voice cracking, agony threading through every syllable. Regret and love warred in his eyes. We don't leave our own behind, London whispered, voice thick with emotion. His knees hit the snow beside him, body trembling with rage and grief. Christian's eyes softened, the hard lines of his face relaxing for the briefest moment. You boys, I knew you'd be great. I just didn't think I'd have to miss it. Don't, Leo choked, tears streaming down his face, mingling with the blood on his cheeks. He reached out, hand hovering over the wound, the silver shard glinting darkly, unable to bring himself to pull it free. I'm proud of you, both of you. You were never just survivors. You became wolves. A weak smile cracked through the pain. He looked at them one last time, gaze lingering on their faces, memorizing every line, every curve. His sons, his legacy, the future of Moonhill. Lead them, he whispered. The words were a final command, a father's last breath turned into a promise, and then the alpha of Moonhill went still. His body slumped forward, head resting on Leo's shoulder, silver glinting as the last of the light faded from his eyes. The wind held its breath, as if in mourning. The trees bowed their heads, branches heavy with snow and sorrow, and 2 wolves howled their grief to the night sky, a long, heart-wrenching lament that echoed through the silent Foresta promise, and a plea carried on the winter wind. The old order had passed. A new era had begun. The lodge stood silent, a sentinel of grief against the twilight. Every wolf in Moonhill, from the smallest pup, whimpering and confused, to the elders, their faces etched with the pain of long years, and lost wore the somber raiment of mourning. Leather bands, dark as dry blood, circled their forearms. Fur-lined cloaks, heavy with sorrow, muffled their movements. And across their brows, a smudge of ashes, a gritty reminder of mortality, a shared mark of respect for the fallen alpha. Christian's body lay deep beneath the tangled, ancient roots of the oldest tree in the territory, the first fang. His form, still powerful even in repose, was reverently wrapped in the ceremonial pelt of the original alpha, a relic passed down through generations, a symbol of leadership and unwavering strength. 100 torches, their flames flickering like mournful tears, lined the path leading to the first fang. 100 wolves knelt along the way, each head bowed in silent prayer or remembrance. The air itself vibrated with the weight of their collective sorrow, a tangible manifestation of the bond that held Moonhill together. Leo and London stood beside them, brothers in grief and burden. Sentinels, yes, tasked with protecting the pack, but more than that, sons first, forever bound to the man who now lay beneath the earth. London's hands trembled as he reached out to light the fire bowl at the base of the first fang's roots. The tinder crackled hesitantly before catching, mirroring the uncertainty that flickered within him. Leo reached out, steadying London's hand without a word, a brief, silent reminder that he wasn't alone. Behind them, the soft rustle of fur and the quiet patting of paws announced the arrival of dignitaries. Wolves from neighboring packs, drawn by respect and obligation, began to converge on Moonhill. Alpha Brenna of Red Thicket was the first to step into the circle, her scarred face as severe as winter stone. She moved like a storm, held barely in check, flanked by 5 of her fiercest warriors silent, towering, loyal to the bone. With a soldier's grace, Brenna bowed low, her right hand pressed over her heart, the gesture heavy with both reverence and history. Not long after, the ground seemed to hum beneath the boots of Alpha Maurik of Ashen Vale. Tall, broad, and gray-bearded, he carried the weight of countless winters with quiet dignity. Beside him stood his Sanhi's Bata, younger echo of his father, clad in the same rattling wolfbone armor. Maurik approached Christian's resting place and placed a gleaming blade at his feet, his craftsmanship flawless. "A warrior deserves steel for the next hunt," he said, his voice deep as roots. From the fading light came Alpha Vera of Ice Hollow. Pale as the snow she ruled, her beauty carved from ice and silence. Her presence seemed to lower the very temperature of the air. When she spoke, her voice was crisp and echoing. "Moonhill mourns," she said simply. "The mountains mourn with you." A figure emerged next from the shadows lean, sharp-eyed, every step deliberate. Alpha Kaito of Stormpine bore the Thunderbird of his bloodline across one shoulder, dark ink against darker skin. He gave a curt bow, his voice calm and sure. "Christian spared my pack a war," he said. "I've come to return the peace." And still they came, one after another, as if drawn by the same pull of duty, grief, and respect. Alpha Thorn of Hollow Run, once a bitter rival, now a steady ally, his face a roadmap of scars and stories. Alpha Ilana of Duskend, cloaked in silver, her silence saying what words could not, her eyes heavy with meaning no one dared translate. Alpha Mero of the Far Reaches followed, surrounded by warriors robed in the deep red of their homeland, their eyes flickering like the firelight they passed, through quiet, vigilant, unyielding. Then, as if conjured from the mist itself, Elder Rorik of the Wandering Kin appeared. Age clung to him like frost, his fur matted, his eyes clouded with the weight of years. No words escaped him, only a howl, low, ancient, and filled with sorrow. A sound older than bloodlines, it rang out over the gathering, mourning a brother lost and a world forever altered. The funeral transformed into something larger than mere grief. It became history in the making, a pivotal moment etched into the collective memory of the surrounding packs. Alliances were subtly forged, rivalries quietly acknowledged, and the balance of power subtly shifted with each arrival. As the twin moons rose high above the lodge, bathing the clearing in their ethereal glow, the formal ritual began. The silence deepened, broken only by the crackling of the newly lit fire. London stepped forward first, his shoulders squared, his voice clear despite the tremor that still ran through him. He stood before the first fang, the flames casting shadows across his face. "You gave us more than a home," he said, his voice laced with emotion. "You gave us purpose." Leo followed, his presence a silent counterpoint to London's outward grief. "You taught us not to fear strength," he said, his voice resonant and firm, "but to wield it, to protect with it." Then, in perfect unison, their voices blending into a single, powerful declaration, they spoke the Sentinel oath, the words echoing through the silent lodge. "We guard the gate. We shield the kin. We walk in the shadows, so others may rest in light. We are not the first. We are not the last. We are the line between." A low, united growl, a primal sound of loyalty and commitment, rose from the entire lodge, encompassing every wolf present. One voice, one pack, bound together by loss, legacy, and the solemn oath they had just witnessed. The fire blazed beneath the first fang, consuming the carefully chosen tinder. Sacred herbs, imbued with potent magic and ancient symbolism, were thrown into the flames. Wolfsbane, to ward off evil spirits. Moonroot, to honor the celestial guardians. Frostpine, to represent the enduring strength of the pack. The smoke, thick and fragrant, curled into the night sky like a spirit ascending, carrying Christian's essence towards the heavens. Christian's body would rest with the roots of the first fang until the moon was full, allowing the earth to embrace him and the pack to pay their final respects. Then, and only then, would he be given to flame and sky, his ashes joining the wind, his spirit forever free. The fire from Christian's pyre had barely cooled when the war table was assembled. The scent of ash and grief still clung to the air, a somber reminder of their loss. But sentimentality had to be put aside. Survival demanded action. Inside the Moonhill Lodge's grand hall, stone torches blazed against frost-dark walls, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. The air was thick with tension, not smoke. Every breath felt heavy with unspoken fears and simmering anger. Over 24 wolves stood gathered alphas, their authority etched into their very postures. Betas, loyal and observant, war captains, their hands itching for a fight. Seers, their eyes clouded with visions of what was to come. All had sworn to mourn Christian, their fallen leader. Now, they came to do what he once did best: keep the balance, to safeguard their way of life from the encroaching darkness. Leo stood behind the head of the table Christian's chair, left empty, a silent monument to his absence, out of respect. He didn't sit, couldn't bring himself to. Neither did London. They stood, cloaked in black and silence, a united front. They were his legacy now, the shield against the storm. They watched the room the way Sentinels should, assessing every nuance, every shift in the atmosphere. Their eyes, sharp and vigilant, missed nothing. The discussion began civilly, a veneer of composure barely masking the urgency beneath. Brenna of Red Thicket was the first to break the silence, her voice roughened by grief, but steady. "The pyre burns," she said, eyes fixed on the flames, "and already the earth shifts beneath us. Whatever killed Christian, whatever tore through those patrolcid, wasn't madness. It was precision, calculated." Her words didn't rise, didn't waver, they simply settled, heavy and certain, into the space between them. A low grunt came from Varik of Ashen Vale. "Aye," he muttered, voice gravel, thick. "3 of mine died on the border last moon. No ferals, no scavengers. These ones moved like they trained for it." He shook his head slowly. Hard, fast, silent, like they knew exactly where to strike. Kaito of Stormpine, younger than most but no less formidable, leaned in from the shadows, his fingers drumming once on the wood before unrolling a piece of parchment. "They left this," he said, voice quiet but biting. He slid the sketch forward, etched into the bark east of my territory. A crude image stared up from the tableau wolf's eye, cleanly struck through with a jagged slash. Desecration, unmistakable. No one spoke right away. The fire crackled, but the silence had weight now, meaning. The kind of silence that comes before the storm. London's breath hitched. The air seemed to thin, constricting his lungs. Leo's fists clenched, the knuckles white against his dark skin. The fury that had been simmering within him threatened to boil over. They had seen that mark before, etched in their memories with blood and fire. London stepped forward, his voice low but clear, cutting through the murmurs of concern that was carved into the trees near our birth den. "After the massacre." The words were a cold pronouncement, a stark reminder of a past they had desperately tried to bury. A sharp voice cut through the hush, cold as frost. "Then where were the Sentinels when your alpha fell?" Vera of Ice Hollow, pale eyes unblinking, held their gaze with icy scrutiny. Leo's head snapped toward her, eyes blazing, teeth bared in a snarl. "Careful." London's hand lifted, a quiet signal that calmed Leo without words. His voice remained steady, even under the weight of the room's collective stare. "It's a fair question." Leo's nostrils flared, but he stepped back, letting London speak. London let the silence stretch before he answered, eyes sweeping across every alpha present. "We were on the training grounds with the betas and initiates. Father said he was taking a routine patrol with Mara, Henry, and Dune. We didn't think anything of it. It was routine." Brenna's brow furrowed. "And you didn't follow?" Leo's growl was low and sharp. "When your beta is training new blood and you take a patrol, do you blame your beta when things go wrong, Brenna? Or do you blame the bastard who started the fight?" A tense hush fell. London's gaze stayed calm, voice quiet but firm. He was our alpha, our father. We trusted him to handle a routine patrol, the same way you trust your warriors every day. Leo's fists relaxed, but his eyes stayed hard. We're not here to shoulder guilt while the real threat is still out there, London added softly, still beneath the quiet. But we are here to finish what he started. The torches hissed, shadows flickering as tension rolled through the room, shifting suspicion into wary understanding. The room held its breath, the weight of London's words settling over them like a shroud. Torchlight flickered, shadows stretching long and dark across the walls, as if the lodge itself braced for what would come next. Vera, her voice like cracked ice, sharp and brittle, pierced the silence. You two were the only survivors of that slaughter. You saw nothing? Nothing that could tell us who was responsible? The question hung in the air, laden with expectation and a hint of accusation. Leo's voice came out like a growl, rough and raw with pain and hatred. Only his eyes, red, like embers, like hate that learned how to walk. The image was burned into his soul, a constant reminder of his failure, his helplessness. Varik, said a voice from the back of the hall, ancient and trembling with a knowledge that was both a burden and a warning. All heads turned. The speaker was Elder Rorek of the Wandering Kin, his old voice ragged, but steady, holding an authority that transcended rank. Years of wandering and wisdom settled on his shoulders. I knew him, once, before the blood rites, before he lost his name. Speak, Brenna commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Rorek stepped into the circle, his movement slow but deliberate. He was born to the Bloodfangs, a rogue-born pack deep in the hollow wastes, exiled, cursed, believed to be wiped out generations ago. But Varik survived. He took their rituals, their madness, and made it doctrine. His words painted a grim picture of a twisted ideology born from pain and isolation. What does he want? Ilana of Duskin asked, frowning in confusion and growing dread. Rorek met her gaze, his eyes filled with a sadness that spanned generations. To destroy us, not just Moonhill, all packs, all clans. He believes leadership is a leash, that the old ways must burn. He's building a war cult, a legion of the lost fueled by rage and ambition. And you've seen what he leaves behind. Leo stared down at the table, his gaze fixed on the crude sketch of the slashed eye. He didn't just kill our pack, he used it to send a message. The same one he sent when he killed Father. The realization hit him like a physical blow, a crushing weight of guilt and responsibility. Leo's jaw flexed as he scanned the room, eyes darting from face to face, catching the frustration, the fear, the thinly veiled anger. London's fingers drummed lightly against his thigh, a rhythm that matched the restless flicker of his eyes as they swept over the crude drawing of Varik's mark on the table, the empty space where Christian should have stood. The wary glances shared between alphas who weren't used to standing under the same roof without drawing blood, and then a realization dawned on London. Leo, he said quietly, leaning in, the shadows of the torchlight sharpening the lines of exhaustion on his face. Look at them. Look at all of us. Leo's brow furrowed. We are looking. No. London's voice dropped lower, his eyes locked on Alpha Malric speaking to Brenna in the corner, Kaido scanning the room, Vera's pale fingers tapping on the hilt of her blade. Really look, Leo. He left a mark for every single pack here. Each one of them has a story about a border raid, a symbol carved into a tree, a body dropped on their doorstep. Leo's eyes darkened, anger flaring before sinking into something heavier. He's pushing us. London nodded, the motion slight, like a branch bending under snow. Hurting us. First us, then Father, now them. Leo's eyes flickered toward Christian's empty chair, then back to the table. It's a message, a trap dressed like an invitation. London's jaw tightened. We think we're gathering to fight back, but we're exactly where he wants us. A bitter chuckle slipped from Leo, low and humorless. Father's death wasn't a blow struck in anger. It was bait. London's voice dropped to a whisper. And we took it, every one of us. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of realization pressing down like the storm clouds gathering outside. The lodge suddenly felt smaller, the walls too close, the torches too dim. Leo's eyes snapped to London's, dark and furious, his mouth opening. We need to. London turned toward the alphas, drawing a breath to speak, to warn them, to tell them everything they'd just pieced together, to say the words that would shatter the illusion that they were safe. But he never got the chance. The roar tore through the air like a living thing, deep and guttural, vibrating the beams overhead, rattling the iron torches against the stone walls. It was close, too close. A split second of silence followed, sharp and absolute. Then the windows exploded inward as heat slammed against the walls, a wave of fire erupting outside, flames licking across the heavy shutters, devouring the cold night air in a rush of orange and black. Screams rose outside guards, sentries, pack wolves caught in the first rush of flame. The compound was burning. Shadows writhed across the walls, the firelight replacing the torches with a violent, hungry glow. The alphas stumbled back, hands dropping to weapons, eyes wide with shock. Another roar, closer this time, split the night, and the fire answered, crackling and snapping, as if it were alive, as if it, too, was hunting. Leo's eyes glinted in the rising glow, jaw clenched, his voice low but carrying as he turned to London. It's starting. London's throat bobbed as he swallowed, forcing the fear down, letting cold purpose replace it. No, it's here. And outside, beyond the rising wall of flame, the forest roared again, a promise of blood and ruin. The compound was a hellscape. Flames roared along the wooden outer walls, embers swirling through the black smoke as if the night itself was on fire. Screams echoed wolves caught in the chaos, some dragging others from the flames, others howling as they fell. The main gate splintered inward with a deafening crack, a battering ram of brute force and dark will. Through the smoke and falling ash they came, rogues. Dozens of them, eyes glinting like coals, some half-shifted, jaws gaping with jagged teeth, claws raking at the burning earth as they charged. Their howls tore through the fire's roar, their hunger and rage like a physical weight. Leo's breath fogged in the searing air as he turned to London, the orange glow reflecting in his eyes, sweat and ash streaking down his face. You ready? Leo's voice was low, almost calm, the storm behind the steel. London rolled his neck, cracking it, eyes locked on the charging tide. Always. They moved as one. Leo shifted mid-leap, bones cracking, fur ripping through skin. His massive wolf formed a dark blur against the fire. He collided with the first rogue, jaws clamping down on his throat, dragging it to the ground as hot blood sprayed across the dirt. London was at his side, still in human form, twin blades flashing as he spun, slicing a rogue's tendons, dropping it before finishing it with a clean thrust to the heart. Watch left, London shouted. Leo spun, slamming his shoulder into a rogue trying to flank them, sending it sprawling into the flames. The stench of burning fur and flesh was thick, gagging, but there was no time to think, no time to breathe. A young wolf pup, barely shifted, stumbled out of the smoke, eyes wide with terror. A rogue lunged for him, claws raised. Get down, Leo roared, his voice deep and inhuman. The pup dropped, and Leo lunged, his jaws closing on the rogue's skull, crushing bone with a sickening crack. London grabbed the pup's arm, dragging him to safety behind a fallen beam, pressing a hand to his face. Stay down, stay quiet. Survive. Another wave came, more organized, pushing in from the eastern side. Alpha Brenna was there, bloodied but standing, roaring orders as she and her warriors clashed with the rogues. A massive rogue slammed into her, claws tearing at her shoulder. Leo leapt over the chaos, crashing into the rogue and tearing it off her, the two of them rolling through the dirt and ash. The rogue's claws raked down Leo's flank, tearing fur and flesh, pain flaring like lightning, but Leo's jaws closed around its throat, ending it. You owe me, Brenna! Leo barked, blood dripping from his muzzle. Brenna wiped blood from her eyes, nodding once before diving back into the fray. London moved like a phantom, his blades singing through the smoke, precise and deadly. A rogue lunged, and London sidestepped, grabbing its wrist, snapping it before driving his blade up under its chin. Another came from behind, but London spun, the second blade finding the rogue's ribs, twisting as the rogue screamed. London! Leo's voice boomed. London turned just in time to see a massive rogue bigger than Leo, in full form charging through the flames, eyes wild, jaws snapping. It hit London hard, lifting him off the ground and slamming him into the dirt. The world blurred, pain exploding in his chest. The rogue raised a claw, ready to end him. Leo crashed into it, the two of them tumbling, dirt and ash exploding around them. Leo's claws raked down the rogue's back, but the rogue fought back, jaws snapping around Leo's shoulder, biting deep. Leo roared, the sound shaking the ground, and with a surge of brutal strength, he ripped the rogue's throat out, standing over the corpse, blood steaming in the cold night air. He looked down at London, who was struggling to rise, blood dripping from his mouth. "You good?" Leo growled. London spat blood, nodding. "We're not done." The flames roared higher around them, the compound a burning ring, the screams and growls mixing with the crackle of fire. The rogues kept coming, wave after wave, and the night felt endless, a tide of blood and ash and teeth. And through it all, Leo and London stood, the storm within the fire, unyielding. Dawn was nothing but a promise beyond the smoke. The compound was in ruins, the main hall partially collapsed, bodies littering the dirt, steam rising from the blood-soaked ground as the fire continued to eat through the remains of the walls. Survivors fought in small clusters, pushing back rogues who came in relentless waves. Leo was limping now, blood matting his fur, one ear torn, but his eyes burned, each breath a growl as he tore through another rogue, claws raking through its chest. London moved through the chaos like a blade in the dark, exhaustion pulling at him, pain burning in his ribs where they were cracked, but his focus never wavered. A rogue lunged, and London's blade flashed, cutting its throat in a spray of hot blood. "Leo, on your six!" London shouted. Leo spun, claws raking up, catching a rogue by the jaw and tearing it open, the rogue collapsing as Leo snarled, shaking blood from his muzzle. They were tired, bleeding, but alive. A sudden stillness rippled through the burning compound, a hush that cut through the screams and fire, a weight that pressed against every chest. The rogues stopped. They stepped back, forming a circle, clearing space in the chaos, and through the smoke, he came. Varik. Tall, imposing, his eyes like burning coals, hair matted with ash, dark leather armor scorched but intact, claws dripping blood. His presence was like ice and fire, sucking the air from the lungs of those who saw him. Leo shifted back, standing human, blood dripping down his side, breathing hard, staring Varik down. London moved to stand beside him, blades ready, his eyes steady. Varik's lips curled into a slow, cruel smile. "The cubs of Moon Hill. How many bodies will it take for you to understand you're already dead?" Leo spat blood, his voice low and dangerous. "Come find out." Varik laughed, the sound like gravel and flame. "Gladly." He moved faster than the other, slamming into Leo, the two of them crashing through a burning support beam, ash and sparks exploding around them. Leo grunted, pain lancing through his side, as Varik's claws raked across his chest. London was there, blades flashing, slicing across Varik's arm, drawing dark blood. Varik roared, swinging a backhand that sent London sprawling, blades skittering across the dirt. Leo grabbed Varik, slamming his forehead into Varik's nose, breaking it with a wet crunch. Varik howled, claws slashing across Leo's shoulder, tearing deep. Leo roared back, his hand closing around Varik's throat, slamming him into the ground. "You think we're dead?" Leo snarled, face inches from Varik's, blood dripping onto Varik's face. "We're just getting started." Varik's eyes flared, and with a surge of strength, he threw Leo off, rising to his feet. London was there, leaping onto Varik's back, plunging a blade into Varik's shoulder. Varik screamed, reaching back, grabbing London by the hair, and throwing him to the ground. Varik turned to finish him, but Leo lunged, grabbing Varik by the face, his thumb digging into Varik's eye. Varik screamed, and Leo raked his claws down Varik's face, tearing deep, leaving 4 jagged, bleeding lines across his cheek and eye. Varik stumbled back, blood pouring down his face, eyes wide with shock and rage. Leo stood over him, breathing hard, his own blood dripping, eyes burning. "Remember that." Varik's face twisted, hate and pain mixing for the first time, and with a roar of fury, he disappeared into the smoke, his rogues retreating with him, fading into the burning forest. Silence fell. broken only by the crackle of flames, the groans of the wounded, the soft cries of those left behind. London pulled himself to his feet, blood in his mouth, wiping it away as he moved to Leo's side. Leo's chest rose and fell, every breath a growl. He looked at London, eyes hard, then out into the burning forest. For the first time, London rasped, spitting blood into the dirt. He knows we're a force. Leo's lips twitched, a cold, vicious smile cutting across his bloody face. Then let him come. And behind them, the sun finally broke the horizon, casting the ruins of Moon Hill in blood and gold. The fires had burned low by dawn, leaving behind the reek of ash and wet earth as snow began to fall, hissing against embers and blackened timber. Smoke drifted like ghosts through the ruined compound, curling around broken beams and the bodies of the fallen. Wolves moved through the wreckage with quiet reverence, carrying the dead, laying them side by side beneath snow-dusted tarps, marking them with carved tokens of the pack. London's hands were raw from digging, dirt and blood caked beneath his nails as he laid another body down beside the others. Leo stood nearby, holding the broken arm of a warrior who hissed in pain but did not cry out, helping him to the makeshift healer's corner beneath what was left of the main hall. The air was filled with the low sounds of grief-murmured prayers, the scraping of boots, the soft, wet cries of those who had survived but had lost everything. It was too quiet, Leo thought, as he pressed a blood-soaked cloth against a young woman's shoulder wound, the kind of quiet that came after storms, before the world remembered how to move again. A small sound broke the hush, a hiccup sob, muffled and shaking. Leo turned, blinking against the ash in his eyes. A small figure darted from behind a charred beam, barefoot, clothes torn and covered in soot. The pup Jacob, the one they had told to hide, was running toward him, stumbling over the uneven ground. "Hey, kid!" Jacob flung himself at Leo's leg, tiny arms wrapping around it, face pressed against his thigh, his whole body trembling as he sobbed. "I thought you died," he gasped between hiccups. "Please don't die." Leo froze, the world narrowing to the heat of that small, shaking body clinging to him, the sobs rattling against his leg. London turned, still holding a bloodied cloth, his eyes softening, his breath catching in his throat as he watched. Leo reached down, his big, scarred hand closing around Jacob's tiny, soot-blackened one, squeezing gently. "I'm not going anywhere, pup," he said, his voice rough, breaking. Jacob lifted his tear-streaked face, eyes wide, terrified, trusting. "Promise?" Leo knelt, ignoring the pull of stitches in his side, until he was eye level with the boy. "Promise." Jacob's small fingers tightened around Leo's hand, refusing to let go. London walked over, crouching beside them, his eyes glinting wet in the cold morning light. He placed a hand on Jacob's thin shoulder, grounding him. "Jacob, listen to me," he said softly. "When we say stay, you stay. When we say move, you move. You stay with us, and you don't leave our side. Do you understand?" Jacob's lower lip quivered, but he nodded hard, wiping his nose with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of soot across his cheek. His voice was a small, shaking whisper. "Yes, fathers." The world went silent. Leo's breath caught, a memory slicing through the smoke and ash, a small, shaking hand in his own, a cold forest, the scent of blood, Christian's voice saying, "You're safe now." London closed his eyes, exhaling shakily as the memory crashed into him, too being held, the promise of safety, a home given when all was lost. Jacob was still gripping Leo's hand, refusing to let go. Leo swallowed hard, his thumb brushing over the boy's knuckles. "You stay with us, Jacob," he said, voice low, thick. "We've got you now." London nodded, eyes on his brother, voice gentle but firm. "We've got you." Jacob leaned forward, wrapping his thin arms around Leo's neck, burying his face there, sobbing quietly, finally letting himself fall apart. Leo's arms came up, holding the pup, his eyes closed, jaw tight, a single tear carving a line through the ash on his cheek. London reached out, resting his hand on the back of Jacob's head, steady and sure. For a moment, there was peace. For a moment, they were not warriors or sentinels or the last line between their pack and the darkness. They were brothers, and they were fathers. Jacob pulled back, blinking up at them, eyes red but hopeful. "I'll be good," he whispered. Leo ruffled his hair gently, forcing a small, tired smile. "I know you will, pup." London's hand squeezed Leo's shoulder, grounding them both. They looked at each other, ash and blood between them, the cold morning biting at their skin. A silent promise passed between them. "We have a pup to raise." The snow fell gently around them, softening the burned earth, and for the first time since the fire, the compound felt like it might one day be a home again. Inside what was left of the grand hall, the remaining alphas stood, cloaks damp with snow, eyes dark with exhaustion and wary expectation. Betas and seconds of the fallen alphas held themselves stiffly, clutching the tokens of their fallen leaders, eyes hollow but attentive. Leo and London stood before them, black cloaks ash-streaked, the firelight catching on the scars along Leo's jaw and the dark circles under London's eyes. Yet, they stood straight, eyes sharp, voices steady. London's gaze swept the room, taking in every face, the silent tension. Leo stepped forward, his voice carrying, gravel rough but clear. "We don't have time for grief, not now. Varik thinks he's won. He thinks he's broken us." He looked at Brenna, meeting her eyes directly. "Red Thicket has a massive underground shelter, correct?" Brenna blinked, caught off guard, her scarred brow furrowing. "How do you—" Leo didn't let her finish, a small grim smile ghosting across his lips. "We have the same—" London's voice cut in, smoother, precise. "We need every woman and child, every elder, moved to those shelters immediately. High-ranked Omegas from each pack will gather all food, first aid, salves, bandages, tools, warm clothing, everything. We store them underground, and we store them now." A murmur rippled through the alphas, a mixture of relief and hesitation. Leo's eyes flashed. "Don't stand here questioning. If you want your people alive, move." London stepped forward, pulling a scrap of charcoal and parchment, drawing fast as he spoke. "We will allocate space, so each pack's numbers are balanced. We can't afford gaps in security or overcrowding. Every pack here will send 2 of their fastest runners back, gather the supplies, and direct the people underground." Alpha Vera folded her arms, her icy eyes assessing. "And who guards the entrances?" Leo's jaw tightened, looking around the room. "We do. The Sentinels will guard Moonhill's shelter. You will guard your own, with your warriors. We'll coordinate runners between shelters to track movement." London looked at each alpha, forcing eye contact, letting the weight of his quiet certainty settle over them. "We are not hiding. We are preserving. Because when the time comes, there will be wolves left to fight." Alpha Malric grunted approval. Brenna nodded sharply. One by one, the alphas began to straighten, spines stiffening, their fear transforming into focus. Leo turned, spotting Jacob peeking in from the broken archway, soot still smudged on his cheek, eyes wide with the confusion of a child in a world of wolves. Leo crouched, opening his arms, and Jacob ran to him, hugging him fiercely, burying his face in Leo's neck. Leo's arms came around him, holding him tightly for a moment before pulling back to look him in the eye. "Jacob," Leo said, his voice thick, "you're going down to the shelter with the others." Jacob's lower lip trembled. "But I want to stay." London knelt beside them, resting a steady hand on the boy's thin shoulder. "Listen to me, pup. When we say stay, you stay. When we say move, you move. You stay quiet, you stay hidden, and you stay alive." Jacob's eyes brimmed with tears, but he nodded, his voice small. "Promise you won't die." Leo forced a tight, broken smile. "We promise we'll try our best." Jacob hugged London, then Leo, gripping them with surprising strength for one so small. His voice was a whisper, trembling. "Okay, I'll be brave. Like you. I love you, fathers." Leo's breath caught, a flash of memory slamming into him like a blade. Cold snow, Christian's hand reaching down, the promise of safety. London swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. "We love you too, Jacob. Now go with the healer, pup." Jacob wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and ran to the waiting healer, glancing back one last time before disappearing into the hallway. Leo and London stood, exchanging a look that said what neither could voice aloud. We have a pup to raise and a war to win. It took 3 days. 3 days of endless movement, ash and snow-caking boots, voices hoarse from shouting orders, blood dried on their hands as they dug out the injured and moved the dead. The shelters were packed, tunnels lit with flickering lanterns, the low murmur of fear mixing with the scent of herbs and boiled water. Runners moved in and out like ghosts, bringing news from other shelters, tracking supplies, carrying orders. Leo and London slept in short, restless shifts, blades never out of reach, eyes constantly scanning the entrances, the forest beyond, the people they had sworn to protect. And then, when the last child was underground and the final cart of supplies rolled into the shelter's mouth, Alpha Kaido of Stormpine arrived. He stood in the torchlight, cloak heavy with snow, a line of warriors behind him, weapons strapped across their backs, faces set. "You've done well," Kaido said simply, looking between the twins. London nodded, voice tired but firm. "Not enough." Kaido's eyes glinted. "Then let's finish it." He stepped forward, unrolling a map across the nearest table, pinning it with a dagger. Stormpine's packhouse has the highest vantage point in the valley. Reinforced. Defensible. We will gather every alpha, every beta, every warrior willing to fight, and we will bring every weapon we have. Leo's eyes narrowed. "We'll draw Varik in." Kaido nodded. "And we end him." The room fell silent, the crackle of the torches, the only sound. London stepped forward, his hand resting on the map, his eyes meeting Kaito's. "We'll bring them," London said softly, "and we'll be ready." Leo's jaw flexed, a ghost of a grin flashing across his scarred face. "And when Varik comes, we don't run. We don't hide. We show him what it means to corner wolves in their own den." Kaido's answering smile was cold and fierce. "Then let's gather our war council." London turned to Leo, a silent agreement passing between them. This was it. The next step toward ending Varik, toward reclaiming what had been stolen, toward proving to every wolf who watched that Christian's sons were more than survivors. They were the storm. The wind howled across the Stormpine Ridge as wolves poured through the fortified gates, the sound of boots on dirt and snow merging with the low rumble of growls, orders, and the clink of weapons. Over 300 warriors, alphas, betas, seasoned fighters, and those who refused to hide underground gathered in the courtyard of Stormpine's packhouse, breath misting in the cold air. The massive timber gates closed behind them with a resounding boom, iron bolts sliding into place. It was a sound that felt final, but not hopeless. Leo and London walked beside Alpha Kaido as he strode forward, dark cloak swirling, his boots crunching over frost and gravel. His sharp eyes swept over his people, who stood waiting, tense yet focused. Then Kaito raised his hand. His wolves moved instantly. They split, fast and precise, taking positions along the inner walls, climbing ladders to watchtowers, checking heavy barrels lined along the parapets. No shouting, no confusion, only crisp calls of "station" and the crackle of horns as the signal passed along the wall. Leo whistled low under his breath. "They move like one." Kaido glanced sideways, a small, wolfish grin playing at the corner of his mouth. "We practiced for more than raids." He led them up a narrow path that wound around the packhouse, higher toward the hill's edge. The ridge fell away below, a sweeping view of pine forest and the burned scars of the last battle visible in the distance. London frowned as he scanned the terrain below. Those patches of earth, they look off. Kaito's eyes glinted as he nodded toward the disturbed soil scattered in a pattern around the base of the hill. "They should. I have a very clever engineer. Each of those mounds is a retractable spike pit. They lower and raise on rotation from inside the packhouse." Leo's eyebrows shot up. "You can control them from inside?" "Hidden in a safe room beneath the control room," Kaito confirmed. "They'll cycle up and down, break charges, break formations. Keep them guessing." Shock rippled through the alphas gathering behind them, and even the Stormpine warriors paused, a low hum of awe running through the cold air. London stepped forward, tapping Kaito's shoulder, a rare, genuine smile cracking across his tired face. "Smart, smart, smart." Below them, a sharp command was shouted. "Pull!" Stormpine wolves sprinted to the perimeter. yanking thick planks from the earth. The sound of wood scraping and thumping echoed across the courtyard as the boards came away, revealing a dark glint beneath. Water. Wide, shallow trenches circling the compound, 2 to 3 feet deep, catching the gray light of dawn. The water steamed faintly, warmed from underground channels, enough to prevent freezing, enough to swallow a torch in a hiss of steam before it could catch the walls. Wet motes, Kaido said simply. Let's see them try to burn us out again. The Alpha stared, thunderstruck. Vera shook her head slowly, a smile of disbelief ghosting her lips. We have been thinking too small. Leo turned toward the others, voice firm. We adapt, or we die. Kaido lifted his hand, gesturing around the compound. As if on cue, Stormpine warriors moved swiftly, pulling back tarps and coverings, revealing what lay beneath. Barrels of sand and water were stacked beneath each tower and along the walkways, ready for any spark or torch that might threaten the walls. Thick coils of thorn branches were positioned near choke points, a silent promise of torn flesh to any who would charge without caution. Watchtowers stood vigilant, each crowned with alert horns ready to sound at the first sign of trouble. Along the walls, defensive overhangs jutted outward, creating shelter for archers and slingers, allowing them to rain death while staying protected from return fire. The roofs of the structures within the compound were layered with sod and stretched hides, forming a damp, heavy shield against flame. Everywhere, warriors moved with focused precision, practicing quick response drills as they carried buckets of sand and water to simulated fire points, calling out to each other, moving as one. It was not chaos, but preparational rhythm of readiness that pulsed through the cold morning air. Kaito's voice cut through the sounds of boots and shouted drills, calm and unyielding. Defense is as much a weapon as your blade. Remember that. For a moment, there was silence as the Alphas took it in, the crisp air filling their lungs, hope stirring beneath the fear. Leo glanced at London, who nodded once, quietly. This was how packs survived. Their pack would not be caught off guard again. That was their unspoken vow. Alpha Kaito led them across the courtyard to what looked like a woodshed, stacked with split logs and axes embedded in stumps, the scent of fresh pine heavy in the cold air. This way, he said, gesturing for them to follow. The Alphas entered single file, boots creaking on old wood. Kaito reached for a rope hidden behind a beam and pulled, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness beneath the woodpile. They moved down, torches lit, the smell of damp earth rising as the steps carried them deep under the hill. The tunnel opened into a wide corridor supported by thick timber beams, lanterns hanging at intervals, their glow revealing crates of supplies and racks of spears and arrows lining the walls. Leo ran his hand over the packed earth, inspecting it with a warrior's eye. Solid work. London's gaze swept over the weapons. A fallback armory. Kaido didn't look back, his voice echoing softly. And an escape route. They reached the end of the tunnel, where a heavy wooden ladder rose toward a hatch sealed with a thick iron bar. Kaido placed his hand on it but didn't open it. This leads to the western forest, he explained, turning back to face the circle of alphas and betas. It will bring us behind Varik's forces when the time comes. We will not use it until we are ready. If they have spies, we do not give them this advantage. Brenna exhaled, her breath a white cloud. And when we are ready, Kaito's eyes were hard. We strike them from behind, and we clean up what's left. Silence followed, but it was not the silence of fear. It was the quiet before a storm, the moment when wolves shifted their weight, ready to pounce. Alpha Malric grunted, nodding toward Kaido before turning to the twins. He clapped Leo on the shoulder, the weight of it firm but approving. Your father would be proud, seeing you here, learning. Standing with his allies, ready to finish what he started. London met Leo's eyes, something steady and fierce passing between them, an unspoken promise that they would not falter. Leo's jaw tightened, a slow grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. We're not done yet. London looked back at Kaido, nodding. Start splitting up the warriors across defensive positions. Varik will come, and when he does, we will be ready. Kaido nodded, gesturing for them to follow him back up the tunnel. They climbed the ladder, emerging into the cold air, the scent of pine sharp, the sky overhead steel, gray, heavy with snow. Leo and London stepped toward Kaido, catching him before he moved to join his captains. For a moment, there was no sound but the creak of ropes and the murmur of warriors, readying for the coming fight. "Thank you," London said, voice low but steady, his eyes meeting Kaito's with quiet respect. "For showing us this, for showing everyone here how underprepared we've been." Leo nodded, jaw tight, but sincerity clear in the lines of his scarred face. "We fought, but this," he gestured to the moats, the watchtowers, the organized drills playing out with precision. "This is how we survived the long war." Kaito studied them, his sharp gaze softening just slightly. "Christians spare my pack a war once," he said, voice quiet enough that only the twins could hear it. "He didn't have to, but he did. He told me one day it would be my turn to protect the packs, that it wasn't about one pack surviving, but all of us surviving. This," he gestured to the organized chaos of preparation around them, "this is what I can give back." London's jaw worked, emotion flashing in his eyes before he mastered it. "After this, things changed. We planned together. We trained together. We stopped waiting for a threat to come and start building a future worth protecting." A small, wolfish smile flickered across Kaito's lips. "That's how your father would have wanted it." Leo clapped Kaito's shoulder, a rare moment of warmth. "And it's how we'll do it." They held the moment, three wolves under a gray sky, warriors planning not only for the coming blood, but for the world that would follow when the ash settled. As the alphas fanned out, calling orders, Stormpine warriors moved with ruthless efficiency, reinforcing walls, checking the water moats, and loading crossbows in the towers. Leo and London stood at the ridge, looking out over the forest where Varik would come. The pack house was quiet behind them, the quiet of readiness, the quiet of wolves waiting for blood. And when Varik came, they would not run. They would fight. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes as the rogues came. They poured from the tree line in a black tide, their howls splitting the dawn, teeth bared, claws flashing, eyes burning red in the gloom. The Stormpine watchtowers roared to life with horns, the low bellow rolling across the ridge as archers raised bows, waiting for the call. Leo stood on the parapet, wind whipping his hair, breath fogging, eyes sharp as he watched the first wave crash against the outer defenses. Rogues howled in confusion as they slammed into the moats, torches snuffed in hissing steam, bodies plunging into the shallow, icy water. "Archers!" Kaito's voice boomed. A rain of arrows fell, dark shapes streaking through the snow to meet the rogues, with a thud of flesh and snapping bone. Screams rose, cut short by a second volley. Stormpine warriors along the wall moved in perfect rhythm. Sand and water buckets readied for stray flames. Shields braced. Spears angled outward. Thorn barriers funneled the rogues into kill zones, forcing them to climb or crawl where blades were waiting. Leo turned as London arrived at his side, blood already spattering his dark cloak from the first defense lines. "West side's holding. For now. For now," Leo echoed, his gaze cold as steel. He pointed. "Watch them." London followed his line of sight. Rogues were shifting, regrouping, the smarter ones testing the spike pit. When the spikes retracted with a hiss of hidden gears, a few rogues rushed forward only to scream as the spikes snapped back up, impaling them. London's eyes flickered with grim satisfaction. Kaito's engineer is worth his weight in gold. Below, warriors roared as they pushed the rogues back from the walls, blades and axes flashing. Alpha Brenna's voice rose in the chaos as she cut down a rogue twice her size, her wolves locking shields and forcing the enemy back into the snow. "Hold the lines!" Leo roared, voice rolling over the battlefield, cutting through fear. The rogues fell back, regrouping again, pulling the wounded with them, the snow beneath them red and steaming. For a heartbeat, the world fell silent. Then the second wave came. They charged with reckless hunger, some leaping over the moats, others using fallen bodies as bridges. Flames streaked through the air as torches arced toward the walls, but Stormpine warriors were ready, dousing them before they could catch. The clash was thunder and blood, steel ringing on steel, the air thick with the scent of iron and smoke. Wolves shifted mid-charge, fur ripping through flesh, claws tearing as they met the rogues in a brutal melee beneath the walls. Leo dropped from the parapet, landing with a thud, his blade slicing through a rogue's neck in a spray of blood. London was beside him, moving like shadow, blades flashing, eyes cold and clear. They fought as one, the twin storms of Moonhill. Left! London shouted. Leo spun, burying his blade in a rogue's gut, twisting, pulling free as the rogue collapsed. Right! Leo barked. London ducked, sliding under a claw swipe, his blade slashing upward, severing an arm before driving into the rogue's chest. They moved through the chaos, warriors falling in behind them, rallying around the Sentinels as they carved a path through the blood and snow. The rogues pushed harder, numbers pressing against the defenses, bodies piling up along the moats, the air a haze of steam and ash. Leo! London's voice snapped him around. From the forest beyond, a horn blew a deep, hollow sound that made the air vibrate. The rogues paused, parting, and Varik stepped through the line. Tall, broad, cloaked in black, his eyes burning like coals, the 4 fresh scars Leo had left across his face standing out stark and red. His smile was a jagged promise of pain as he lifted a blackened blade, pointing it toward the twins. Leo, London whispered, breath misting. It's time. Leo's jaw tightened, his grip on his blade steady as he met Varik's gaze. Yeah, let's end this. Varik moved like a storm, cutting through Stormpine warriors with brutal, efficient strikes, his blade leaving steaming wounds in the cold air. The rogue surged around him, pushing the warriors back, the air filled with screams and the clash of steel. Leo and London moved toward him, the world narrowing, the roar of battle fading beneath the thundering of blood in their ears. Varik saw them coming, and his smile widened, cruel and hungry. Little cubs, he called over the chaos, come die like your father. Leo didn't answer. He sprinted. Varik met him with a roar, their blades crashing together in a shower of sparks, the impact rattling through Leo's bones. Varik was strong, monstrously strong, and he pressed forward, forcing Leo back step by step, their blades clashing in rapid, brutal strikes. London came from the side, his twin blades flashing, forcing Varik to pivot, deflecting one blade while the other sliced across Varik's ribs, drawing dark blood. Varik snarled, backhanding London with bone-breaking force, sending him sprawling across the blood-soaked snow. Leo roared, slamming his shoulder into Varik's chest, driving him back. They grappled, blades forgotten for a moment as they fought like wolves, fists and claws tearing at each other, blood spraying in the snow. Varik's claws raked across Leo's back, tearing deep, but Leo's hands closed around Varik's throat, squeezing, forcing the bigger man down. You think you're a god? Leo snarled, spit and blood flying. You're nothing! Varik's eyes glowed brighter, his lips curling as he drove a knee into Leo's gut, breaking free. I am the end of your kind. London was there, blades carving into Varik's side, forcing him to stumble. Varik swung, catching London's arm, bones cracking as London gasped in pain but didn't drop his blade. He stabbed forward, driving it into Varik's thigh. Varik roared, tearing the blade free, swinging it at London, but Leo tackled him from behind, slamming him into the ground. They rolled, punching, clawing, the snow beneath them turning black with blood. Varik's hand closed around Leo's throat, lifting him, claws digging in. You die here! Leo's eyes burned with fury as he forced a hand between them, pulling a hidden blade from his belt. No, you do. With a savage yell, Leo drove the blade up under Varik's chin, forcing it through the warlord's jaw and into his skull. Varik's eyes widened, the light in them flickering. London staggered forward, grabbing Varik's arm as he fell, forcing him to his knees. Together, the twins pushed, driving the blade deeper, until Varik's body shuddered violently and went still, his burning eyes going dark for the first time. Silence fell. Then, slowly, the sounds of battle returned, but they were different, now ragged. Desperate cries turning to victorious roars as the rogues faltered, breaking without their master to drive them. Around them, warriors raised weapons, howling to the sky. Leo fell to his knees, panting, blood dripping from his face and hands as he stared at Varik's corpse. London sank down beside him, clutching his broken arm, his face pale but eyes alive. It's done, London whispered. Leo's breath was a shaky, ragged exhale. A laugh caught somewhere in the pain. Yeah, it's done. The snow fell quietly, hissing against the warm blood in the snow as the twins of Moon Hill looked at the body of the warlord who had haunted their nightmares. And for the first time in a long time, the forest was silent. The snow fell softly as the bodies were laid to rest. The clearing beyond Stormpine's walls was lined with cairns of stone, pine boughs placed gently over the dead. Warriors moved slowly, their breath misting in the cold air as they lifted the fallen, laying them beside each other with the care owed to kin. The ground was dark with blood, but the snow softened it, covering the worst of the stains. London stood with his arm in a sling, directing a young Stormpine wolf where to place the last stones. His eyes were red but dry. The weight of grief settled into something quieter now, something that hummed like an old wound. Leo moved among the mourners, offering a nod, a hand on a shoulder, a few quiet words. His own bandages were fresh, blood seeping through, but he moved with the steady presence of a wolf who would not falter while others needed him. They burned the rogues' bodies away from the cairns, the smoke rising in thin, dark columns against the cold blue of the dawn sky. When it was done, the wolves of every pack gathered in the courtyard, the hush thick, the only sound the wind rattling through the pine boughs above. Leo and London stood at the center, beside Alpha Kaito, Brenna, Malric, Vera, and the others who remained. "We lost many," Leo said, his voice low, carrying in the cold air. "But we did not lose everything." London's eyes swept the gathered faces, the scars and tired eyes, the small nods of those who understood. "We did not lose a future." Alpha Brenna stepped forward, her arm in a sling, her gaze steady. "We need to be better. We need to be prepared." Kaito nodded. "We will build together, train together, share scouts, share plans, share warnings. Varik's war is done, but if we do not change, the next war will find us unready." There were murmurs of agreement, the words carrying like the promise of a new oath. A noise broke through the silence, small feet pounding across the hard-packed snow. "Fathers!" Jacob burst from the line of healers, running, his small face bright with tears and relief. His hair was wild, his clothes too big, and he nearly stumbled before Leo caught him, sweeping him up into his arms despite the pain that flared in his ribs. Jacob wrapped his arms around Leo's neck, squeezing tight, his voice muffled. "You came back." London stepped closer, ruffling the boy's hair gently, his lips twitching with a tired smile. "We told you we would." Jacob pulled back, looking between them with tear-bright eyes, his lower lip trembling. "You're really not going to leave me?" Leo's eyes softened, his scar pulling as he smiled. "Never, pup." Jacob's small arms went around Leo's neck again, tighter this time, before he leaned back to look at London. "I stayed. Like you told me." London swallowed, blinking rapidly. "Good. That's what a wolf does." Jacob's eyes, bright and fierce, looked at them both. "Can we go home now?" Leo glanced at London, and something quiet passed between them, something that felt like the first breath after a long winter. "Yeah," Leo said, pressing a hand against the boy's back. "We're going home." The packs broke apart slowly, calling to their wolves, organizing the wounded, sharing supplies. Plans were discussed, scouts organized, messages promised. No longer scattered packs in fear, allies. Leo stood beside London at the edge of the courtyard. Jacob perched on the low wall beside them, watching as warriors and healers moved with purpose, as laughter thin but real rose among the tired faces. London's gaze was far away, his breath clouding the morning air. "We're different now." Leo nodded, his hand resting on Jacob's shoulder. "We have to be." The boy leaned against him, small and warm, eyes wide with the seriousness of a child who had seen too much. "You're alphas now." Leo and London exchanged a look, the memory of Christian's hand, reaching for them in the snow so many years ago, a living ghost between them. "No," London said softly, ruffling Jacob's hair again. "We're guardians." Jacob nodded solemnly, as if he understood something older than his years. Leo looked out over the forest, the dawn light breaking through the trees, catching on the snow, turning the world to gold. A new day, a new era. He glanced at London, a quiet, fierce smile pulling at his lips. "We've got work to do." London's answering smile was tired, but unbreakable. "Yeah, we do." They stood there together, two wolves who had survived fire and blood, who had become the shield their father once was, who would stand between the darkness and the world that needed them. And as the dawn broke fully, Leo, London, and Jacob turned toward it together. That's the end of this tale, but in the world of the supernatural, there's always another shadow waiting. Thank you for staying with me through every twist, turn, and heartbeat. If you enjoyed the ride, there's more waiting for you. Just check out the other audiobooks on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more magic, monsters, and stories that go bump in the night. Until next time, stay curious and Braven, never stop listening.